Alright, this is a review of Young Justice Season 2, Episode 14, entitled The Runaways. Alright, so the summary of this episode is as follows. When the Reach's teenage experimental subjects take off on their own, Nightwing sends Blue Beetle after them. Jaime catches up to them, but soon has to deal with a marauding android, Red Volcano, and the teenagers help him out. So, in this episode, we catch up to some of the test subjects of the Reach's genetic experimentation. And one of the notable members of that is Virgil Hawkins, also known as Static Shock. So in this episode, we catch up with Virgil and his other companions as they're in Star Labs, and they're running various experiments on them to test out their powers. And Virgil and his other companions are getting rather testy of this. They're tired of being experimented on, and they're ready to go on their own, especially Virgil, who's, as we find out, is wanting to go home back to his family, because unlike most of the other subjects, he's not a runaway. So they decide to break out of Star Labs, and in doing so, the heroes are notified of this. So Nightwing, has Jaime, go and intercept them. So Jaime finds them, and he talks to them. It's like, I understand all the stuff you've been through. I know what it's like to be a teenager and have superpowers and all the crap that goes along with that. And so, he says, just, I'll help you out. But then, after he finds out, he's notified again that the laboratory that the teenagers escaped from is under attack by the android Red Volcano, and he is there to get the robot Amazo, which has the ability to absorb the powers of any superhero, or I guess metahuman, that it comes across. And so this is obviously a serious concern. The other young teenagers who are there, help them out. And they're, one of them notably being Jaime's friend Ty, and obviously along with Virgil, who's Static Shock, and the other characters known as Ed and Asami, or Sam, who's so they help them out. And so after, so Jaime eventually ends up becoming victorious over Red Volcano, but he does a significant amount of damage. And this is really rather out of character for Jaime, the fact that he's so angry and so belligerent, and after the fight is concluded, we find out that Jaime actually isn't in control of his Scarab the way he is. We see him, at the end of the episode on top of a mesa, talking to Green Beetle, and, in this conversation, Green Beetle mentions after the teenagers, have gotten to escape after his dealings with Red Volcano, that it turns out that the Green Beetle has actually used his psychic abilities to alter the Scarab to actually take control over Jaime, and thus making Jaime an agent of the Reach without having to kill him. And, this is actually rather unfortunate, because this kind of screws up all of Bart's plans to avert a Reach apocalypse. And I guess it's ironic, because Jaime probably wouldn't have consulted help from the Green Beetle if Bart wouldn't have mentioned to him about the Reach apocalypse. So Bart probably screwed up and brought on the apocalypse by doing that. And that's certainly very interesting. Also at the end of the episode, Virgil, along with Ty and Ed and Sam, end up trying to run away again, and they go, and this time they're intercepted by Lex Luthor, who mentions that he can help them out. And, the children wisely ask Lex, why should we trust you, and what can you do for us? And he says, well, especially after, because they know he works with the Reach, and he mentions, I think that they're trying to, bamboozle me just as much as they are everybody else. So I want to team up with you guys, and keep you safe, and try to, take on the Reach. And so they're rather receptive of this. Obviously we know this is dubious, and that this isn't going to work out. Especially for Virgil, because, he does end up becoming Static Shock. So I doubt he's going to be an ally of Lex Luthor for particularly long. An interesting fact, a lot of the characters in this episode, with the exception of Virgil, as far as the teenage experiments, a lot of them are actually based off of characters that appeared in the Super Friends, and they're kind of, back in the 70s, and they're kind of modernizations of these characters. Ty is obviously a more modern version of the Apache Chief, and Ed is actually a more modernized version of a character called El Dorado, and Asami is actually a more modernized version of a hero called Samurai. So it's kind of going to be interesting to see how they use these characters and how they modernize not only their powers, but, the characters themselves. They're probably doing a pretty good job thus far with Asami's character, because the samurai was originally a male, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Asami. And I do kind of like how they've updated Ty's powers, although I didn't really have a particular issue with the Apache Chief being able to grow very tall, and that seemed like that would be a good foil to a lot of the characters in the series who have, shrinking powers. But I do like the astral projection thing, and that seems pretty interesting. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that works out. And obviously, it's going to be interesting to see how things work, with Jaime and the Scarab. I'm also interested, particularly because with the Green Beetle, manipulating Jaime, is that I know, when they meet him, Megan, technically interrogates him, but that's, well, interrogates not like, she tries to peer into his mind. But obviously, as we know last episode, he kind of willingly gave her mind to her. So I'm kind of wondering, since he did that, if he learned anything in her mind, particularly about Calderon and Artemis. And I wonder if he knows that, being in her mind, that Calderon's a triple agent. And so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't know what the likelihood of that is, but it would be interesting to see. Alright, so that concludes this week's review of Young Justice, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys again next week.